Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. On today's podcast episode, I have got David Watts, and David is a fleet product manager specifically looking at electric vehicles for VW Financial Services. He's also previously been commercial manager at Arrival. He's been involved in fleet for years and years, and we'll talk about that in a second. And worked for the Energy Saving Trust. So thank you for joining me, David. It's lovely to see you. We met back in April time now, didn't we?
Right.
At Fully Charged Live.
It's taken a while to get this to happen.
Yes, doesn't it? Well, it didn't help when I think I wasn't well last time, was I? So my apologies for that. That's one. Right. But no, listen, thank you for joining me. It's really great to have you on here.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure. It's always good to talk about stuff, particularly.
Yeah, well, exactly. Especially something. So we were just talking before we started. You've been involved in fleet for 27 years, which kind of nearly floored me then, because I suppose I'd seen what you've got on LinkedIn, but I hadn't worked it out on my fingers and thumbs, know. And it was 27 years. That's mad.
It's a slightly.
Why? How did you get into this?
Well, I fell into it actually. I mean, it is it's a distressingly long time actually. And just as a slight aside, we have an undergraduate program at Volkswagen, and so I did my introduction to my undergraduates the other day, and so of course I said, well, I've been in fleet for 27 years, and as soon as I said it, I suddenly realised, yeah, you weren't born, because they're all sort of 20, 21. I was like, oh, that means I'm actually quite old. Yes, so 27 years. This wasn't the plan. I was going into the armed forces originally, but I damaged my back whilst I was at university, just before I did my finals, just before I was about to go into the army. So I spent a year going in and out of hospital trying to get that sorted, and then that didn't happen. I then spent a year doing research with the Ministry of Defence, which was fascinating, but wasn't going to go where I wanted it to go. And then I randomly fell into Enterprise Rent-A-Car in the very early days of Enterprise Rent-A-Car. They weren't long in the UK when I joined them. So that was my first step into fleet, and it's been downhill ever since, or something.
But you also said you've worked in 17 of those 27 years. You've worked in sustainability.
Yes, that's been my core focus. So most of my career has been around sustainability. So that started with the Energy Saving Trust back in. Actually, it was July 2006, so I'm just coming up to my 17th anniversary for that. And that's when being green really wasn't trendy, and no one cared, and they used to ridicule you. And I've had some interesting conversations with people about sustainability, and I've certainly had my fair share of commentary as to why I shouldn't be doing it and why I'm wrong and everything else. But it's been interesting.
I suppose over the years, though, that commentary would change a lot. I would hope over the years. You tell me, kind of how many years, kind of recently, how many years has it been since that narrative has changed in what you've been listening to, or has it changed?
Well, yeah. So interestingly, for a lot of those, I have had quite a lot of abuse either to my face or online through LinkedIn when I post something or I've presented at a conference or a seminar, and people take it on themselves to be. Which is quite interesting. That did die down to some extent a little while ago, but then interestingly, it's ramping up again as electrification is becoming a thing now. and becoming real. And we're seeing it in the press just generally that there is
Oh,
the
it's
last
shocking.
6 to 9 months has seen a real ramping up of anti-EV narrative,
Mm,
which is generally either inaccurate or misleading,
yeah.
or doesn't tell the whole story in any sense.
Yeah.
And that is then being translated into sort of the online comments that I get back again, which is interesting. So that really did die down for a while, but is definitely coming back again in terms of people who I mean, that's one of the downsides of being fairly active on social media, and my preferred is LinkedIn for this stuff.
Yes.
Is that inevitably people that you don't know who are connected to connections feel the need to comment, and that
And comment in a negative way.
yeah, which and go out of their way to comment, and it's like, which I find quite interesting as to why do you feel the need to do that for somebody that you really don't know in any
I
sense
know.
whatsoever. So
But
yes,
I wonder. Go on, sorry.
there really has been a growth in that again over the last year. It's been interesting,
I
but
wonder if it's the fact that they don't know you. It's a bit like being people, because I suppose in a way it's like being trolled, isn't it? You
yeah,
know, and actually, is it? I mean, we're kind of going off on a bit of a tangent here, but is it easier to troll someone or to be rude to someone who you don't know?
yeah,
Because
probably,
you're never going
probably,
to be face to face, theoretically, you're not going to be face to
indeed.
face with that person. So
Yeah,
it's a bit of a cop out, isn't it? It's a bit of a
yeah,
coward's way. And I
yeah.
think I'll just do this and add this comment just because I feel like it.
Yeah, I mean the interesting thing, I can kind of understand that if it was Twitter, which I don't particularly use, or something similar,
Mm,
but LinkedIn is a professional, well, is allegedly a professional sort of, and so they may not know me, but all of their own contacts and their colleagues and will see what they're
mm,
saying, which is
mm.
kind of interesting.
And it's
So
trackable as well, isn't it?
yeah,
Everything that people say is kind of trackable, and But I mean, I've seen things blown up on LinkedIn myself, and I also was kind of party to, well, not, somebody did that to me years ago, and kind of, and to a point where I just thought I'm not going to go on LinkedIn, and I didn't go on LinkedIn for years and years. So, but I mean, I think. We've had comments on the full circle posts on LinkedIn, and what I tend to do is I tend to, especially if I know somebody, because I'd rather not engage with somebody if it's not something that I feel that I can answer from a really, kind of knowledgeable point of view.
yeah,
For example, I've had somebody kind of make comments about batteries, battery life and stuff. So, so I've just tagged in Dr. Ewan McTurk and Professor Colin Heron and gone,
yes,
a message to go, can you help me here? So,
yeah,
but I think, I don't know whether you found the same, that actually there are people in the community that will stand up for
no,
you, stand
yeah,
up
no,
for.
definitely. Yeah, and I regularly tag those two as well. I'm getting better at. I used to respond to everything and take everything very personally. I'm
Yes,
getting better now at recognizing when there's no point having conversation. There's nothing that you will ever say to that individual that will change their mind.
exactly.
So there's no
That's it,
point in
isn't
going.
it?
So I'm getting better at recognizing that and just stepping away from it, and potentially sometimes I delete the comments because they're just offensive. But other times I do engage if they are if I feel that there's something that can be said. But you do have to be very careful not to go down a rabbit hole. Um, so,
Absolutely,
but,
absolutely. No, no,
but
you're right, and because yeah, there aren't. There's yeah, there's no reason to go. You've just you. It's about picking your battles, isn't it?
completely. And
You know,
if I responded to every single one, I would never come off LinkedIn.
I do find myself. Um, I find myself being on LinkedIn quite late at night, which is kind of getting a little bit like, oh my God, I need to stop doing this because this is
No,
ridiculous. Do you
no,
know what I mean?
it's,
But yeah, but look, if we kind of come on to the positive side of,
yes,
of fleet and electrification, then so obviously if you've been working in sustainability and kind of to do with fleet for 17 years, there's got to have been a lot of good things that you've been involved in, and that
Yeah.
for you to want to actually stay in the industry for so long.
Yeah, no, I mean it's been quite a journey, has to be said, and a lot has changed, and it I can't believe how long it's taken to get here. And so when people talk to me about how hard it is to electrify, and in a very generic sense, I go, well, you should have tried it 15 years ago, because that as a conversation then, talking to organisations about electric vehicles before the Nissan Leaf was launched. So just to give it some sort of vehicle context,
Oh my God. Oh, I can't
try
even.
having those conversations with fleets, and bearing in mind they weren't necessarily open to the conversation in the first place, and
No.
didn't. And climate change in those days, the talk you're having with Toddington, he was talking about that climate data from I think it was Norwich University, which was 2009. So this is all around that same sort of time. So if you think people are sceptical now about
Oh,
climate change and decarbonisation, well, then back then it was just ridiculous. So it's I forgot where I was going now, yeah. So it's changed a lot, and so having a conversation then compared to having a conversation now is quite different,
yeah.
and it's significantly easier now. And it has taken. I can't believe how long it's taken to get here. When the Leaf was launched, we were very excited by that, because it was the first mainstream family-size car that had a capability that sort of blew our minds, really. And yet in reality only did 50 to 80 miles, which is
Yes.
just
Yeah.
ridiculous that we got so excited by that.
No, it's not ridiculous. If you think about it, yes, fair enough. Where we are now is different, but
Yeah,
I think, I suppose coming in as a first electric vehicle must have been an
yeah,
absolute amazing
yeah,
thing. You're talking about these things, and then it actually
yeah,
comes in. It's actually manufactured, and then you go, wow, look at
yeah.
this, and this is the start of a very different road, isn't it?
Yeah, this is it. So I say, I can't believe, with that happening, I can't believe how long it's taken us to get here. But then at the same time, if you look at the last 3 years, I can't believe how fast it's changed. It's just accelerating, which is kind of a perfect storm of variety of things happening. And the taxation change. Tax changes behaviour. We know that it always has changed behaviour. That's the whole point of taxation and sort of tax incentives, whatever they might be. And you look at the behaviour change from. So in my previous life, I was working at Arval, and I was sort of tracking Arval UK's order take by fuel type by all our different sales channels, which is a little bit sad, but I was quite. I like data and spreadsheets, and EVs were sort of tracking at sort of 1% for cars. It was about 1% of all the order take, and then the announcement in it was July 2019 was the announcement about the change to a 0% tax in April 20. Now we already knew it was going down to 2%, but that had kind of disappeared under the radar, and that extra 2% in reality makes very little difference financially.
Right.
But perception wise, and message wise, it's huge, because it's now free. So we'd known it was 2% for years, or it was going to be 2%, and that was a drop from 16%. But going to free suddenly just changed the whole conversation. So the announcement was in July. We're at 1%. August still the same, and because everyone's on holiday, nothing's really changed, and they've got to give a bit of time for people to sort of do anything. And then September, bang, the orders suddenly started to happen, and then they've just gone on since then, which happened to coincide with things like the Model 3 coming out.
Right.
So prior to that, you'd basically got the Leaf and the Zoe, Tesla Model S, Model X, and the I-Pace and the Audi e-tron had just about come out at the beginning of that year. So you're kind of one end of the financial spectrum that's completely unaffordable for virtually everybody, and the other end of the sort of model segment, which doesn't really work for most people. The Zoe's a great car, we've got one, but it's not a large family car sort of thing. So we then started, the Model 3 came out suddenly, I'm going to say a more affordable, not necessarily affordable, but more affordable family-size car, And then you got some things like the ID3 coming out, and you're suddenly starting to see a whole raft of family-size fleet-type cars all starting to hit the market in different brands, different model segments. And so, of course, we are where we are now. So it's a perfect sort of storm of stuff happening, which is why it's changed so much. But I can't believe how fast it's changing. If you'd asked me back in April 20, the order take that you would see proportion of EVs on the fleet corporate sort of order take, I would never have guessed it would be sort of 40, 50, 60%, which is just insane compared to where we were.
But I was going to say, do you think that with regards to fleet, that salary sacrifice itself has actually made a difference to organisations bringing people on board that way? You know, obviously you've got fleet is one thing, isn't it? But then you've actually got a salary sacrifice scheme, not scream. You know, so you know, you've got two things going there, haven't you? You've got
completely
two theoretically attractive models working.
The great thing about salary sacrifice is it opens up a company car type benefit to non-company car eligible people.
Yes.
Essentially, I know there are companies who sort of removed their company car scheme to put them into salary sacrifice. We just won't debate that. It doesn't make an awful lot of sense because they're both company car schemes in effect. Yeah. But the primary purpose of salary sacrifice is for all employees, principally those ones who who don't have a company car eligibility, whether that's cash or car. So that's really, all the incentives, or the majority of the incentives have been for company car drivers. Particularly now we've lost the plug-in car grant. The incentives are really for company car drivers in terms of tax. So therefore, if you can translate that tax benefit across to non-company car drivers through salary sacrifice, then it opens up a whole new population to making EVs more accessible. Which then brings us to something that I don't believe exists yet, and I really hope it will do soon. Is salary sacrifice for second life EVs. And when I say second life, I don't mean something that's 6 months old or 18 months old that's just come back early. I mean cars that are 4 years old, 3, 4, 5 years old, that would ordinarily be sent off for disposal in one format or another from the lease company. I don't mean disposal as in throwing the bin, I mean remarketing.
I know what you mean.
Off to auction or whatever it might be. But actually the lease co's maintaining them for another 3, 4, 5 years as a second life car, which is, for me, it's a no-brainer because it's for a lease co, it means that they've got a new population they can get money from and make profit from. In reality, any business is there to make profit. So currently they have no access to that population. And you kind of go, well, actually, if you've got all these EVs that are now starting to come back that are sort of 3, 4 years old, well, then the battery warranty is typically 8 years, and that's where people start to get unnecessarily but focused. Well, then lease them for another 3 or 4 years, and you still got them well within the battery warranty in terms of resale. It means that, and as great as salary sacrifice is for new EVs, they're still unaffordable for a lot of people, because it doesn't matter how tax efficient it is. There are lots of people who can't afford to spend £300, £400, £500, £600 a month on salary sacrifice. So it may well be tax efficient, but it's still unaffordable. But if you can then give somebody an opportunity to get a car that's 3 years old or 4 years old through salary sacrifice, then arguably that rental is going to be that bit cheaper. It doesn't solve the problem, but it does mean there's a new population who would benefit from the tax efficiency of the system, plus also would gain access to an EV sooner than they would otherwise be able to afford. So for me, there's a real opportunity there for all lease cos and just the industry. But lease cos need to get beyond this thing of they don't want to keep cars beyond sort of 4 or 5 years. They're obsessed with, and I understand why, because of arguably primarily about maintenance depreciation. The maintenance curve on vehicles once you're sort of hitting 80,000, which you don't have in quite the same way for EVs. And I get, trying to price a vehicle that's 9 years old or 7 years old is a little bit more difficult, but but it is a
They can
huge
work,
opportunity.
can't
Yeah, they
they?
can
Can
figure it
work.
out.
Yeah.
So salary sacrifice is arguably the biggest growth area generally, I would say, for your average fleet company. So it's transformed that area and has really opened up the accessibility of EVs to a whole set of people who couldn't otherwise afford EVs. So those two things going hand in hand, with the standard company car market has really kept the EV sort of sales figures alive, particularly at the moment where we're definitely seeing the retail market dipping a little. I think because of all the other pressures in reality. So I mean, it's kind of two things. One is there's pressure on household budgets anyway, just generally, which means you are thinking twice about how can you afford a new car. And in reality, the majority of the vehicles are still new cars. And people talk about the affordability of EVs, and EVs are unaffordable. So, well, yeah, but you've got to remember that most people can't afford a new car. Just generally, forget current cost of living situations. Most people can't afford to buy a new car. We're obsessed with the fact that EVs cost this much more than petrol or diesel cars. I say, well, yes, but most people can't afford to buy a new petrol or diesel car, and they mind an EV. So that as a comment is irrelevant in many ways. Most people, there are 2 million new car registrations, but there are 8 million used car transactions a year. So 4 times as many used cars are sold every year. So, and if you think about the fact that prior to 2020, there were only a handful of models, but now we've seen loads coming through the system. Well, it takes time for them to get into the used car market. Yeah. We're only just starting to see that initial surge in the company car market starting to filter through, which means it'll still take another 3 to 5 years to get any real numbers through. And then you'll start to see a decent used car market. And then that's when it starts to become more accessible for the majority. That's not to say that everyone can afford one. Of course they can't. Everyone has, and this is one of those interesting things about everyone has a budget, whatever that budget is. It doesn't matter whether it's £3,000 or £30,000. You have a budget, and depending on the type of car you want, that arguably dictates the brand and the age of the car that you buy. And that's it. So all that basically means is, well, yes, EVs are likely to be that little bit more expensive, no matter what the age is, whether it's brand new, 3 years, 5 years. So that just means, in reality, if you're used to buying, say, a 5-year-old car and running it for 3 or 5 years, and your budget is X, well, then that just means you're going to be buying a 6-year-old car. You're still spending the same money. You're just buying a slightly different profile of car.
I've not told you this yet, by the way. So we got our first EV last week.
Excellent. Well done.
It's 2 years old. It's just it's come through. I know where obviously we've seen the logbook, so I know where it came from. It's come from a subscription service. It only had 14,000 miles on it.
Yeah, it's nothing.
And actually, it cost us £400 less than we paid for our VW Golf back in 2019 when we got it.
There you
go. So actually, it wasn't. I've got to say, and I will say this because people have been listening to this podcast will know the car that I would have loved, which was a Cupra Born, but they're not. They only came out last year.
Yeah.
So probably in a couple of years' time, maybe. Well, sorry, I'm saying probably. Hopefully, in a couple of years' time, it might be something that's more affordable. But you're right. So like I say, so we've got a Hyundai Ioniq or Hyundai, whatever you want to call it now, Ioniq. I know they stopped manufacturing it last year. It wasn't even I'd seen them, but it wasn't particularly on my radar until I spoke to somebody there was an event in Oxford called EVs are for everybody, and a chap there from a company. He was talking about how brilliant these were and how how economic they were and they were good cars. So we started looking for one, and actually, it seems absolutely fine. And like you say, it's about them moving from the fleet market into kind of used car, and and we've been used to buying something that isn't we can't afford brand new, just as you're saying. So 2 or 3 years old is kind of where we've gone, you
Yeah.
know, and it's good because I mean, you know, when we got our Golf, that was probably around 12,000 miles, you know, so we try and look for lower mileage, and probably we could have got one for, excuse me, for a little bit less if we'd have gone for higher mileage. But you know, it's kind of swings and roundabouts,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. And that's the thing is, and so you know, people talk about affordability, and we're expecting the EV market to be suddenly exactly the same as the ICE market, and so well, yeah, but the ICE has had 100 years to get to this point, and
Yeah,
therefore it's
exactly.
established. We're really still only at the start, as you say, yeah, in another 3 to 5 years, the used market will be full, but there'll be a lot more choice at different age brackets and therefore different price brackets on different cars. There's still a sort of, you see all the new stuff happening, and then there seems to be this expectation that suddenly they're all available in the used market. Well, of course they're not. It's going to take a few years for them to sort of filter through. But that's okay. That's okay. We're getting there slowly. I mean, I spoke at the Oxford EV Summit.
Last year.
Well, I spoke at it in 2019.
Oh, okay, all right.
Pre-COVID, and because the format then was you basically got 6 minutes to talk with no slides, no nothing, a real sort of instant TED Talk type concept, which was slightly unnerving for me because I like to have lots of slides with lots of pretty pictures. But I kind of introduced it with being that I've been talking about EVs for a really long time, and I've been saying for a really long time they're nearly here. You know, they're just around the corner. When the Leaf was launched, we had high expectations, and we had a couple of things that sort of came after it. But we had high expectations. It was just around the corner. But then in 2019, it was like, yeah, we are genuinely now starting to go around the corner. I can see the corner now. Not that it's over there. We're just about to go around the corner, and then you've got to look at what's happened in the last 3 years or 4 years, and we're flying around the corner now. So it's and fleet and business is so important because business-related registrations are at least 50%, if not more, of all car registrations. So if fleet gets it, and that's what we appear to be seeing, and it's fine that that's tax-driven, and it's fine that that's changed behaviour. It doesn't matter whether people care about the environment. It's changed that market, and so therefore the fleet market drives what, to a large extent, drives what happens in the used car market. So if fleet gets it, and fleet is then buying, 50, 60, 70% of their cars are EV, and that's it's increasing every year. Well, then that's going to completely change the profile of what the used car market looks like. So it's in 2 or 3 years' time, that used market is going to look quite different to what it does today, and today it looks quite different to what it was 3 years ago. So it's happening incredibly quickly, which is great. But it is interesting how, talking about the sort of conversations I've had, and how I was banging my head against a brick wall about EVs, and have been forever, and all the standard barriers and challenges, and some of them are legitimate in terms of it's a challenge. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's a challenge for people in certain scenarios and whatever. But they were perceived as being insurmountable, all those challenges. But then as soon as that tax went to zero, it's amazing how many people, if you just got to look at what's happened in the last 3 years, thousands of people have suddenly gone, actually, those barriers aren't so bad after all.
Yeah. They're like a load of meerkats, aren't they? Probably all of a sudden they pop up over the top and go, oh, look, this is okay now.
This is it. Suddenly when you realise you can save thousands of pounds, you suddenly go, oh, actually, well, maybe those barriers aren't quite so bad after all, or maybe aren't even real.
Well, when you said about, it doesn't necessarily make so much difference going from 2% to 0%. Well, I suppose actually, if you've got 100 vehicles, that adds up, doesn't it?
It's a big deal for the NI, for the company. I mean, when it first happened, I did some quick analysis on what the costs actually meant, and I think from a driver's point of view, that tax change effectively was about £10 a month. In terms of that's the savings, so from 2% to zero, roughly. I think for a 20% taxpayer, something like that. So that was the difference it made. So suddenly, you've got £10 a month-ish, depending on the car. That has suddenly persuaded people that actually it's now affordable or it's now doable. So, well, there's nothing. That actual change is nothing, but it's the fact that it's free that really kick-started everything, because that really started with your sort of, your senior management who are going, hang on a minute, I can have an Audi e-tron or a Model S or a Jaguar I-Pace and pay no tax on that. Why aren't EVs on our company car policy? And then of course then it all filters down, and
does everybody like free, or is it just the British?
I think everyone likes free. Everyone likes free
You
stuff.
reckon?
Yeah, everyone likes free stuff. Everyone clears the hotel out of free stuff in their room, don't they?
Well, yeah, there is that.
Free
I
stuff.
don't do that, of course.
Never turn down the free stuff, and that's why you go to a conference or you go to a trade show and everyone's walking around with this stupid bags full of stuff they don't actually want.
Well, do you know? I don't think you saw me on the at Fully Charged Live when I was with my son. But my son, who's 17, he actually quite enjoyed going on it, because we got some free bits and bobs. He was saying, because I did used to take him years and years ago, because we're both celiac, and I used to take him to the allergy show, and I knew quite a lot of people there. So he liked that too, because we got lots of free food. But so it wasn't food, but we got quite a few free bits. He liked that.
Yeah, can't beat it. But no, it's interesting talking about sort of perception of barriers, and how that changes. So one of the things I talk about with it's a fairly staple thing I talk about when I'm sort of doing conferences and whatever, and it starts off as a slightly idealistic bit of rose-tinted sort of view. So I try to talk about EVs differently to the rest of the fleet industry. Because we do have, as an industry, we do have a habit of just regurgitating the same potentially incorrect messages. Because if you haven't spent any time thinking about it, then where do you go? You go and look at some articles or whatever, and of course you then regurgitate it. You don't think about what it's said. But if that article has been written from somebody who just read something else that was also inaccurate, then you sort of go around in circles.
Yeah, there's a lot of that about, yeah.
So one of the things I'm obsessed with, as far as cars is concerned, where you've got a choice as a driver, and you're making a personal choice as to what car you want. I completely disagree with this whole concept of suitability. So everyone in our industry talks about, are you suitable? You see all these articles saying, are you suitable for an EV? And there's a variety of tools out there that you answer a bunch of questions and it tells you, are you suitable or not? And I hate that, for starters, because, well, in 2030, what's going to have changed to make you suddenly become suitable? if you've done this little questionnaire and it says no, you're not suitable, then you've got a problem, basically. I don't like the word suitable, for starters, because it's kind of a yes or a no answer. Are you suitable? Yeah. Yes or no. And if, as an individual, if you're not particularly bought into the whole subject and you're doing it because you think you should or whatever, and it says no, well, then that's it. The door has been closed now for a long time. You've just sort of slammed it, and so they may well have been interested, they may well have been sceptical, they may have been nervous or whatever, but you just told them no, and which is possibly the worst thing you can do to on this whole subject. That you shouldn't be telling them no. You might get a maybe, but I mean, what's the point of a maybe? It's a pointless answer to any sort of questionnaire. Are you suitable? Maybe. And a lot of these suitability tools have a habit of comparing different fuel types and going, which fuel type should you be driving? Are you suitable for a diesel or an electric? Well, that's ridiculous, because I know I'm suitable for a diesel because it just worked for the last 40 years. I've been driving a diesel or a petrol forever, and I know they work. They're suitable 100% of the time. So the fact that it might come out as maybe or something, well, what's the most appropriate fuel type is a different question entirely, in terms of, if you're up and down the motorway, a diesel is fine. If you're in town, then a petrol is better, kind of thing. But EV should always come out as suitable. It's 100% suitable, because I disagree with the concept of suitability. So I'm more interested in accessibility. So bear with me on this one, and your readers. Bear with me. Hold the line, callers. So where we're talking about cars, not vans or operational vehicles, and we're talking about cars, you've made a personal choice to choose this, as opposed to the business has given you the vehicle. and ignoring budget and ignoring sort of body segment in terms of is the right car available for you and can you afford it, I take the view, slightly idealistically, that there isn't a single person in the UK who couldn't live with an EV. Everyone can live with an EV. So you're getting away from this whole suitability nonsense. Everybody is suitable. Everyone could live with an EV. That being said, everyone is on a spectrum of easy to hard. And for some it's really easy, easier than having a petrol or diesel car. And for some it's really hard. But it's not impossible. So you've got that spectrum, and then you've got your own personal willingness to deal with the hard bits, because there will be hard bits at times. For some people it'll be once a year when they do that one trip to see their family in Scotland. And for other people it'll be every day because they can't, if you can charge up at home and you rarely drive beyond 200, 250 miles, an EV is easier than having a petrol or diesel car because you never think about charging. If you can't charge up at home and you're routinely driving 200, 250 miles plus, and when I say routine, I mean 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week, then it's a lot harder. But it's categorically not impossible.
No, it's not.
And if you have two drivers who have got the exact same situation, doesn't matter which situation they're in, company car drivers, particularly because you've got the tax incentive, but even outside of that, one will bite your hand off to say, yes, give me an EV, that'd be brilliant. And the other will go, no, it's just too difficult, I'm too nervous. Even if they're at the far end of it's the really easy side, they'll go, oh no, because that one trip that I have to make, that's completely swaying the whole view on that. It's going to be hard for that trip, and I'm not willing to deal with that hard bit, even though it's only one trip a year. Whereas another driver where it's got a lot harder and having to deal with hard bits every week or every other day, they're going to go, yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that. I'm going to make it work. And actually, if you drive a long way, it's actually easier to deal with I don't have a charge point at home. So we have this weird mixed messaging that's going on that says if you can't charge at home, and EVs are really hard, and therefore, and most of these suitability tools say you shouldn't have ones. Well, no, you should make that decision about the other stuff, because you might have local charging, you might have co-charging. I'm a co-charger host.
Oh, yeah.
And I started that this year because I moved house and I was able to get a new charge point that enabled me to sort of do it properly. And I'm up to about 3,500 miles worth of electric sharing, shall we say, so in terms of people who've used my charge point. So I've got a couple of people who regularly use my charge point sort of once or twice a week. They just park up on my driveway, they book it, they pay for it.
I've actually thought about it, and I've just thought, do I really want somebody rocking up on my drive charging? How does it? What?
They basically book it, so you can decline it. They can't just turn up. They have to book it ahead of time.
Yeah.
You've set the tariff, so you know that you're not going to be out of pocket. You set it. I mean, there's a fee that co-charger charge for the facilitation, if you like. But I make a slight amount. I make pocket money. I make beer money on the charge, for the. In recognition that it's a bit of hassle, because I've got to move my car out of the way when they're parked on so I have to park on the road when they're parked up. But I get a lot of satisfaction out of knowing that two people who can't charge up at home, an EV has suddenly become significantly more accessible to them because they can charge up here. And it comes back to the fact that actually we have this perception, and we're a victim of our own messaging from the early days with the Leaf, which didn't go very far, because our whole messaging was, aren't EVs great because you can charge up at home 8 hours overnight, every night, you've got a full charge, and away you go. That was true then, when you could only go 50 odd miles, and therefore you did want to charge up every night, probably. But if you've got a car that will do 250, 300 plus miles, most people aren't driving very far very often. Even if they're commuting to work 2, 3, 4 days a week, they're only commuting 10 miles or so. So if you've got a car that will do 200 miles and your commute is 10 miles each, I think the average commute is like 8 miles or something like that. So call it 10, round it up. So that's 20 miles total. You've got a car, let's be conservative and say we'll only do 200 miles. Well, that's once every 10 days. It's not even once a week you would charge up. So I know one of the guys who plugs in, he's got an E208. He's using it to commute every day, and he plugs in and most he's plugged in twice a week
Right.
in a week, but typically it's only once a week. And he doesn't charge up anywhere else, as far as I know, from having talked to him. He just uses my charger, so I've completely made it accessible. And he plugs in overnight. He comes around sort of 9 o'clock at night, plugs it in, picks it up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and goes off to work. That hasn't he's 5 minutes walk around away, and that hasn't being able to do that has made an EV really easy for him when it would have been that much harder. But actually, going back to if you're actually driving a long way lot, it's actually easier, because if you can't charge up at home, then and you only drive locally, then you're completely reliant on what's in your local town for it to be convenient. Is there somewhere that you can walk to that's not inconvenient? And do you have to pay for car parking, all that stuff? But actually, if you are routinely driving 100 odd miles for work and back again, well, then you're passing lots of charge points.
And just looking on ZapMap shows that there's absolutely shed loads, aren't there?
So in many ways, whilst you've got to think about it more often, because you're using so much more energy, it's actually in principle a lot easier, albeit you've got to factor it into your life more often than it is to be able to charge up locally. If you're then reliant on local, which might not be very good. I mean, we've got a few now in our town, but you've got to, for most people, they're in the centre of town, and unless you happen to live in the centre of town where I am, that's probably a good 20 minutes walk for most people, and so therefore you've got to leave your car, come back, go back. So that's not ideal. But we do have a random rapid charger at a pizza restaurant, which is quite popular, I've seen.
Well, I'm going to be travelling up to Coventry and Nuneaton next week for overnight for 12 weeks doing some work just on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So I think it's about just under 100 miles, 90 something miles. And I know that the Ioniq should probably do, it's probably about 168 to 185. So I know I'll need to charge, when I get up there. And all I did was I actually looked on ZapMap and found a hotel that had charge points. And actually there were a variety of them kind of quite near to where I was staying. But what I decided was I chose one that had more chargers, because I just thought, actually, the more chargers, the less likelihood they're going to be taken by the time I get there, because I know I'll be working till probably about 4:30. I'll be able to rock up at the hotel sort of between 5 and 5:30, and then and should be able to charge. But because there's so many I think they've got 10 charge points.
Should be
So
all right.
It basically means that I can leave it to charge overnight. So it's just about kind of looking, because this is a new experience for me. It really is. And just looking at the planning of it, I went with some friends to Bournemouth this last weekend. It's the first time I've done it. I've just put a video out on LinkedIn about this, because I was having massive range anxiety beforehand, because we'd had the car since Tuesday. I was tootling backwards and forwards to take my son to school and back, but then this was like 70 odd miles, and then I knew that it was irrational, but I was just slightly freaked out because I was getting non-EV friends getting in with me, thinking, oh my God, I'd already had one kind of joking going, oh, we're going to be a long way from home if we break down. And I was like, sorry if you're listening. But that wasn't a true representation of her. But seriously, once we got off, and it recognised my driving style and everything, and I knew exactly where the charge points were. When I got down there, it was sorted. I felt a lot happier, knowing that I'd planned it. It was just about a bit of planning, isn't it?
No, it is, and in reality, most people don't do those types of journeys very often, and so it does require a little bit of planning for when you're doing that random ad hoc journey that you've not really done before. It's beyond the range of your car, and yes, you do need a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, without a doubt. And it does become easier in terms of the first time you do it, without a doubt, you're panicking about it, in terms of and unnecessarily so to some extent. But saying that, I posted about this on LinkedIn when it happened. I was in my Zoe, and I got to plan G.
God.
But at no point during that process did I panic about it.
No.
Because I knew what the car was capable of. So I was basically driving. So I'm in Hertfordshire. I was driving up to see my parents in Nottinghamshire, which is basically a 200-mile-ish, 210-mile round trip. The Zoe on the motorway, and this was sort of in winter, is around about sort of 180-ish miles. So I knew I was going to have to charge it. But this and then also goes into how people think about charging. So people typically, so if they're doing a journey there and back in a day, a long journey there and back, people think about charging on the way home because they think, oh, okay, well, my car will do say 250 miles. I'm doing a 300-mile journey, well, therefore I need to charge at sort of the 200-mile mark or something like that. So well, no, you just need, if you know you need 50 miles worth of energy, then as long as you've done 50 miles and a bit, then you can charge up at any point after that. It doesn't have to be on the way home. It can be on the way out. And typically on the way out, particularly if it's a work journey, you've probably allowed for time anyway. I mean, I always leave hours of time when I'm going for a work journey. So actually, what's the opportunity for stopping, particularly if you don't need that much energy, just for stopping somewhere on the way for 15 minutes if you've got the time on the way there, rather than leaving it to the end. But anyway, so I was doing that. So I knew I needed... all I needed was sort of 15 minutes worth of charging to get me home at some point during the journey. So I stopped it. So I swung into Watford Gap. They've only got one there, which is really quite irritating. Watford Gap seriously needs updating. Grid, so if you could, when you next have Toddington on, if you could tell him to upgrade Watford Gap, that'd be great. So anyway, somebody was on it, so I was like, fine, I'm not stopping. So it cost me 30 seconds to sort of pull in and pull out again. I carried on, so that was plan A. I swung into then Leicester Forest East northbound. They were both taped off, they were broken, so something's going wrong there. So okay, fine. So swung in, swung out again. It was more hassle rather than so. I've lost a couple of minutes in my journey so far. I then stopped. Having come off the motorway and going to where my parents are. There's a roundabout with a couple of Shell chargers on, just before outside their town. So I'll stop there before I'm only 2 minutes from home now. I'll stop there. Plugged in, all good, and I've had this a few times. This is quite irritating from an EV perspective. Is you plug in, it says yes, it's all good. You tap your card, it's contactless payment. It says payment authorised, and then it says charging finished, and it hasn't done anything. So it hasn't actually done anything. It just sort of starts and then stops instantly and just doesn't do it. So I tried it on both pumps. Wasn't having any of it. And I was like, okay, so I've lost I've lost 10 minutes there, but I was annoyed rather than anything else. Was like, fine. I'm not stressed at this point because I've still got sort of 100 miles worth of charge in my car, so it's really not a problem. So I then went home, had my day there. When I was looking then on Zap Map, I saw there was in an industrial estate in the town. There were some BP chargers, so I'll swing in there. Just out of curiosity, didn't know they were there. I'll go and swing in and see if I can find them. Of course, it was dark, it's raining, it's sort of 4 o'clock in the evening, and I'm driving around this industrial estate, and the postcode didn't take me to where they were at all. Took me to something completely different. So I gave up and thought, well, I'll just carry on, it's fine. But I was more thinking about the fact that, going back to sort of, we talk about Kate Tyrrell and Charge Safe and whatever. I was thinking, well, it's fine for me driving around this industrial estate in the dark, in the rain. And maybe if I'd found the chargers, they would have been all lit up and it would have been wonderful. My guess is they probably wouldn't have been. No, and I think this is just a truly appalling experience. There's no signage to find them or anything like that. And I say the postcode didn't take you to where they were. So I was just thinking, well, that's just really bad. So I swung back into the Shell station again. So what's that? Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D. Swung back into the petrol station again to see Shell. They were both being used. So, right, fine, carry on. Pulled into Leicester Forest East southbound. They were both taped up as well. So Toddington needs to sort those out. So I don't know what's going on at Leicester Forest East. So that's Plan F. But at Leicester, I knew that there was a McDonald's with an Instavolt just off the junction. So I swung in there, and Instavolt's my go-to in reality. Of course, they were then both being used. Oh. Come on. I've still got loads left in the battery, not enough to get me home, and I would pass through Milton Keynes where there's hundreds of chargers. So I was like, I'm just bored of trying now. So I thought, well, I'll just go in. I need the loo now because I've been faffed about so much. So as I came out, somebody was pulling out, so I zipped in there. So that was my plan G. So, but at no point during that was I actually anxious about it.
No.
I knew where the charges were. I knew that I had plenty to get me to Milton Keynes, and I could have swung off at Rugby Services if I wanted, which would have been slightly out of my way, where there's obviously loads and they're great with grid serve. So I was never worried about it, but you did need to know how to think about it and how to plan for it and how to deal with it.
It's frustrating in some ways, though.
Yeah,
It must have been, rather than being, anxious about it, it's more frustrating going, oh, flipping heck.
Yeah. And then I sat on the charger for 15 minutes and that was it.
Yeah.
That gave me enough. Yeah. That's all I needed.
Well, if you're giving yourself lots and lots of time in advance, then that's probably fine.
Yeah.
You know. Hey, listen, do you know we've been talking for ages on this. I've just realised. It's been really, really interesting talking to you. And for those who want to not troll you on LinkedIn, David is available on LinkedIn, but please don't troll him.
Trolling requirements. Yes, if you feel like ranting about EVs, feel free to troll me. Feel free to follow me. I post quite a lot of stuff about EV stuff. So
it's been
really good.
Yeah, exactly. It's been really you've been in the sector for such a long time. It's been really interesting talking to you, David. I really appreciate your time.
It's been a fun afternoon for a Monday.
Hey, that's good. Yeah, exactly. So listen, on that note, I'm going to say thank you again.
Thank you.
And I will see you another time, of course.
Some event somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And for everybody else, I'm going to say see you later and I'll speak to you next time. Bye.
Bye.
You've been watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon and you'll receive all of our weekly videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.